Oh, is it progressing or regressing?
Yes, humanity. What do you think is the future of humanity?
You know, there's... So I'm asked about the future of humanity. Is that yours? The future of humanity and progress. This is what you got asked about a minute ago. What do you think? What do you think about the future of humanity and progress?
I think it's doomed.
Doomed. Because?
Because we're destroying our world.
What do you mean destroying our world?
We're polluting everything.
Who?
Us,
Who?
you, me, everyone.
How?
Trash, paper, plastic.
Is plastic bad?
Yes,
Why?
it stays in the ground for up to 50 years until it decomposes.
So do rocks.
But rocks are natural, plastic isn't.
Well, I mean, they're formed by certain chemical processes.
But can you tell me that you don't use plastic in your everyday basis?
Sorry?
Everyday life?
What's that?
Can you tell me that you don't use plastic in your everyday life?
I'm not criticising it, you are.
I'm not.
You criticise it, you said it's a bad thing, pollution.
Pollution is bad
Why is it, but why is plastic pollution?
because it destroys. It destroys soil.
What does it destroy? I've got a cup here that's lined with plastic on the inside.
Yeah.
Okay, it's true. I'm a bit reluctant when I drink out of this cup because somehow it doesn't taste quite the same as that of porcelain. So I tend to think some of the plastic's melted with the water and gone into me and it spoilt the taste. But otherwise, I think it's an exaggeration about the danger of plastic, you know. I mean, you have to think about the measures taken, you know. After all, you're wearing clothes that are at least partly made of plastic. And certainly your shoes.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm sure of it.
So why is it so bad?
I don't really care about it.
Sorry? No religion. No religion. You need to go to find the religion. Religion over there! Go, quick! Quick! There's no Islam here. That's what I said, no religion here. Right, so, Akbar. I've been coming to Speaker's Corner since 1985. I first spoke here in 1985, December 1985. And I've been speaking, sorry?
More than 30, 40 years.
More than 30 years, that's right. 1985, what does that make it? 37 years, 30, I don't know, a long time. And I started speaking here as a Marxist. And over the years, many things changed, and I'm still a Marxist. And some people wonder why that can be the case, you know. Why would someone stand by Marxism after all the things that have happened in the world since I started speaking here? In fact, I spoke here, when I first spoke here, the Berlin Wall was still there. He was here, the Berlin Wall was still standing.
And you were still standing.
The Soviet Union was still there. And I actually went to live behind the Berlin Wall, you know. I'm the one
Some of us
from
wish you'd
anarchy,
stayed there.
from anarchy in the UK. You know,
Sex
I'm going to go over the Berlin Wall. Well, I did that. I went to the other side of the Berlin Wall and I lived there. Not for long, because shortly after I got there, the Berlin Wall was taken down.
You cause disaster wherever you go.
I tried my best to cause a bit of disruption. And my aim was to try to create, or help to create, an alternative to the system that existed in East Germany that was not the system that existed in West Germany, with the aim that that alternative would pose the possibility for humanity of a different type of life to that was called communism and that was called capitalism. I didn't succeed.
What did you want?
Here we are,
What did you want?
back at Speaker's Corner. I wanted a socialist society that was genuinely democratic and controlled by the people from below to administer their lives and improve their lives without having the rat race of capitalism and the imperial control by capitalist countries, the Western capitalist countries, over the whole world. And I've still stood by those ideas to this day. You know, maybe you're saying I'm a mad, intransigent, narrow-minded, canalized idiot, like many religious speakers at Speaker's Corner.
No, just mad.
Or you might just say you're completely mad. Or you might say, well, he's trying to work out, in the parameters of the world that we live in, some pathway to progress, which was the question you asked about. What is the pathway to human progress? What is the pathway to human progress? Well, I can tell you, a lot of the time, you know, when we deal with questions, we have to deal with negatives, you know, what I don't agree with. And of course, then people turn around and say, well, what do you agree with? If you say you don't agree with that. Right? And in some ways, the two elements are interconnected together, aren't they? You have to, on the one side, work out what you don't want. So I didn't want East Germany everywhere in the world, nor did I think that was possible. I didn't want the Soviet Union everywhere in the world, nor did I think that was possible. Because the character and culture in a place like Britain was different to the Soviet Union. And the way they organised things was dictatorial. And I didn't support that dictatorial regime. On the other side, I would defend the Soviet Union and East Germany against attacks from the Western world, which, you know, was someone on my walking tour this morning, a Russian woman. And she said to me, when I was a child, we were told all these things about how bad the Western world is, about how bad capitalism is. And I never used to believe that. But now I actually live in the Western world. I can tell you nearly everything they said in the Soviet Union about what was wrong with capitalism is true. And there's a lot of truth to that. Well, it helps to have the experience of knowing different social systems to allow you to understand comparatively. That's why you see they talk a lot about this immigration. It's a very good thing to have immigration, because it allows people from different parts of the world to compare and contrast and to present a mirror to you about how the world actually is, rather than just a narrow focus of your own country.
Is that why they're all racist?
Who's racist?
East European former communists. So many of those countries are horribly racist.
It is true that many of the countries of the former Soviet bloc are quite racist.
Horribly.
And I remember...
There was always racist. They joined the war with Hitler and everything.
Not many, actually. Not many.
No.
Some, but you're right, some did. Some did. But that was mostly, you know, most of that, Adolf Hitler, was white-on-white racism. White-on-white racism.
Yeah, the Slavics.
The Soviet, the Germans under Hitler
Nazi
were fighting white Jews, white Slavic races.
Yeah.
That was the main target, because what they said was, they said the British have got their colonial empire in Africa and India, and the idea of Adolf Hitler was, you can keep that empire, and we'll make an empire into the east as far as Vladivostok of white people, who we will enslave. You know, the Slavs. The word.
He was dreaming.
Sorry. He was dreaming, but that's what he dreamed of. You know, many people are dreaming, and many of them cause chaos with their
He
dreams.
had Ukraine down for supplying the grain to the.
Well, he wasn't wrong, was he?
No, he wasn't.
You know, and now many of the battles that went on at that time about controlling resources in areas like Ukraine have come back to haunt us today. The battle about what happened to the Soviet Union now become an active question again. That doesn't mean Vladimir Putin has anything in common with the Soviet Union. In fact, he explicitly declared only a couple of weeks ago, he was saying the Russian Revolution was a disaster. You know, when Prigozhin tried to take power a few weeks ago in his little coup d'etat. Vladimir Putin went on television, he said, this is like the Russian Revolution. It must be avoided at all costs. Chaos and destruction for Russia. That's the sort of nonsense that Vladimir Putin talks. But of course the idea, because Vladimir Putin talks nonsense about that, doesn't mean he's wrong about what's going on in Ukraine. The idea the Western powers are in Ukraine to help the Ukrainian people is the biggest pile of bullshit of modern times. The idea we are in Ukraine to serve the people of Ukraine, the only thing we serve then is weapons. We serve them plenty of weapons.
Proxy war.
A couple of idiots from England believed the story they were told. There's a war for freedom going on in Ukraine. A war for freedom. So a couple of idiots ran over to Ukraine and risked their lives. Many got arrested, some got killed, some others came back. But the British Army, they only sent in special services ops. And then they sent weapons. Every week we send millions and millions of British taxpayers' money in weapons to Ukraine to keep that war going, at the same time as we are forced to pay 30, 40, 50 or 100% more for butter, for bread, for food, for rent, for electricity, for gas. I got my bill from the gas and electricity company, and they said your bill for the 3 months, 1 bedroom flat in London, 1 bedroom, 25 square meters. How much you paid in the bill? £1,200 for 3 months. I don't use anything.
It's a coincidence gas prices go up when Putin invades Ukraine, isn't it?
Well, it is very much a coincidence.
So the things
It's
are
very much a
connected, aren't
coincidence. Sorry?
The things are connected, aren't they?
They are connected. I'm not disputing there's a connection.
So oil and
I'm
gas
not
has
disputing
gone
there's a
up
connection.
because of Putin's invasion of
Can we
Ukraine.
say there is no war between Russia and Ukraine? There is no conflict with Russia. It is NATO's war on Russia. It is NATO for hegemony. It is Western war
Ever since the
against
Cuban
Russia.
Missile
This is to
Crisis,
control the
this
world.
shit has been going on.
So
Of course, anybody who
the East
imagines,
fights NATO is evil.
anybody who imagines there's no geopolitics in this lives in cuckoo land. Oh my God, Ukraine invaded. They're fighting for freedom. Freedom. This is nonsense for a child. For a child of 2. For a child of 2. As if we fight for freedom. If we fight for freedom, there must become consistency in our behaviour. Did Britain fight for freedom in India? Did Britain fight for freedom in China?
South Africa.
Did Britain fight for freedom in South Africa, in
Kenya.
Nigeria, in Kenya, in Sierra Leone, Ghana? Did Britain fight for freedom in the Falkland Islands, in Afghanistan, in Iraq, in Libya? Were we fighting for freedom? Britain has never fought for freedom. Not even in the Second World War. Not even in the Second World War. What was
War for
Britain fighting?
hegemony.
That Hitler invaded Poland. True. Hitler invaded Poland. And they're trying to make out that the invasion of Poland is just the same as the invasion of Ukraine. They're trying to make that out. But of course, there is some similarity in this respect. The idea that Britain was fighting against Adolf Hitler in order to fight for freedom is negated by the very fact that in India, which we occupied, India, and Africa, which we occupied, Africa, they didn't have freedom, they didn't have democracy. And after the Second World War, when the people of India and the people of Africa did fight for freedom, Britain opposed their freedom. So the idea that Britain was fighting for freedom then, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, 300 years ago, or now, is a lie. So if you understand the pattern and the trajectory which Britain has, then you begin to understand what the motivations for the war are. Now imagine the Chinese were to take over Northern Ireland, then send their weapons to the IRA, and support logistically and militarily the IRA. You think Britain would sit back and let the Chinese take over Ireland? You think they would allow them to do that? That's what they're asking the Russians to do with Ukraine. You remember, and it's not just you think the Russians are going in there. And the Americans, NATO, NATO is the Americans. Let's be clear about it. It's not Stoltenberg. It's not Germany. And despite what the Swedes believe and the Finns believe now, NATO is not Sweden, and it never will be Sweden. Sweden will never have any say in NATO, and nor will Finland, nor even does Germany or Germany or Spain. They have no say in what happens in NATO. Everything about NATO is decided in Washington, D.C. Anybody thinks any different, you live in cuckoo land. Cuckoo land.
Trump didn't seem to think that, did he?
Trump didn't seem to think what?
That it was controlled by the US. He was constantly complaining about the European allies not spending as much as he wanted.
Oh, because Trump says something don't mean it's true. Make it
That's
true.
very true.
It just means he was reflecting a certain atmosphere in the United States of America, which is a long-standing and in some ways, a progressive attitude. And that was that America, as the first colony, or one of the first colonies of Britain, that broke free from British occupation, the first to declare independence against the British and fight the colonial occupiers. You know, there was that progressive tradition in America. And some people in America hark back to that as a deluded illusion, that they can come back to America is America on its own. We don't need colonization. We don't need globalization. We can rely upon ourselves and sort our own problem out. That's where that attitude comes from. And it's an understandable attitude. Because and it's correct that America has no right to intervene around the world, has no right to ship weapons to Ukraine, has no right to tell the Ukrainians, you think if America didn't support Ukraine in the war would last for one day. It's entirely a creation and maintained by the Americans. So the idea that this is in that respect, Donald Trump is right. In that respect, Donald Trump is right.
Do the Ukrainians want to live under the Russians?
The Ukrainians want. Depends who you talk to.
Well,
Depends who you talk to. Don't forget, when you talk about invasion, when you talk about war began in Ukraine in 2014. And it followed a coup d'etat organized by the Americans in Kiev because a pro-Russian president was in power and they wanted to remove him. He had been elected, 52% of the population of the vote had elected him to president. But they didn't like it. The Europeans didn't like it because they wanted to expand their territory. They wanted an imperial power to extend across the world, to reach up to the doors of Moscow, reach up to the doors of China, Hong Kong, Taiwan. They wanted to increase their power. I was in East Germany in 1989. I remember when they made deals. The Americans, the British, the French, and the Russians, the Soviets, they made a deal. When we withdraw from Germany, NATO will not make one step further than the Oder-Neisse boundary in Germany. Not 1 inch east of the Oder-Neisse boundary. That was the deal they made. That was what they said, to dissolve the Soviet Union, to withdraw the troops from Germany, to allow Germany to unite. That was the deal they made. And yet here we are.
They're lying bastards.
Czech Republic, Slovakia, Hungary, Poland, Romania, Estonia, Latvia, all of them joined NATO and marched up to the borders of Moscow. So of course the Russians, they felt,
They have a right to
we are in an existential threat. We are facing an existential threat. So therefore we will do, this is the red line and nothing will be allowed. They knew that. The Americans knew that. They were perfectly aware the Russians would never tolerate American forces, American power inside Ukraine. And by the way, the Americans and Europeans were fighting it out in Ukraine. 2014, when the coup d'etat happened and the Maidan so-called massacre, when that happened, the Americans and the Europeans were fighting it out as to who gets the spoils, you know. The American Victoria Nuland, Under Secretary of State at the time, she said, you know what, excuse my French, she said literally this, you know what, fuck the Europeans, she said. We want our power there. It's all about power. The idea, this is not about power. The idea, this is about morals, about humanity, about freedom, about democracy. What democracy? For 3 years now we had. 2020, I remember, we came to Speaker's Corner, when Chancellor Merkel from Germany came to England for the first time, and she went to the British Parliament. She said to them, you know, the first place I went to, sorry to tell you this, she said, was Speaker's Corner. Because Speaker's Corner, in our mind in East Germany, represented freedom. And British Parliament, I'm sorry, we learned this was something created, not just a grassroots movement from below. So she came to Speaker's Corner. And yet 2020, in the name of science, they said you can't come to Speaker's Corner anymore because you're all going to get the plague. Not only can you not come to Speaker's Corner, you must stand 2 meters apart from all other human beings. Not only must you stand 2 meters apart from all other human beings, you must put a piece of plastic in front of your face, like this. I got freedom of speech will be like this. Freedom of speech behind a mask. And then they closed down the hospitals, they closed down the schools, they closed down the universities, they closed down the shops, they closed down the bars, they closed down the restaurants, they closed down society. And they got our children to sit in front of a computer screen all day, all night, all day, all night, looking at the internet. And that's where you're supposed to learn the future from the internet. The hope for humanity is on the internet. Believe what they say on the internet. Believe what they tell you at a table with the Prime Minister and the scientists stand in front of the lectern and tell you every evening at 6 o'clock, keep your mask on, wash your hand for 20 seconds, sing happy birthday twice, keep 2 meters apart, don't go to the shops, don't visit your family, don't kill your granny. All these things they said in the name of science. And I saw this week very peculiar thing. They said that Jonathan Van Tam, remember that guy? Looks a bit Vietnamese, you know. Jonathan Van Tam. So they said in the news this week, I saw it. I was very surprised. The science, you see. Jonathan Van Tam, the man who told you to stay at home, the man who told you to roll up your sleeve, to take the jab, the man who told you to stay apart, the man who told you freedom will come when you behave yourself, when you take the freedom jab. That man now, he got a new job. Consultant to Moderna. Consultant to Moderna. Now, Jeremy Farrar, sometimes they had him on telly as well. Another great expert of the experts. And he used to be head of the Wellcome Trust. Now he's in the WHO. You know what WHO does? WHO gives you special passport. When you're a member of the WHO, World Health Organization, you show your passport, and if there's a criminal charge against you, you got diplomatic immunity. Diplomatic immunity. How many people did they put that funny juice into? How many people did they put that juice into? Did you see? I don't know if it's connected. Probably not. According to YouTube, it can't be. Apparently, there are 15 million excess deaths in the last 3 years, of which 6 million, according to WHO, are caused by COVID. Now, some people might ask a question. If you go to hospital with terminal cancer, and you go into the hospital and the person next to you's got a cough, and when they cough, part of their little droplet, minuscule tiny bit, size of less than the size of your hair, of the width of your hair, enters into your mouth, and then they stick a little piece of what do you call it, a swab, cotton wool swab, up your nose and at the back of your throat. They pull it out, put it into a PCR test, ramp up the cycles, 45 cycles, 30 cycles, each amplify the genetic material by double. By the time they've got 30, they've got billions of parts of the tiniest component of anything in the air in the room where this man's coughing. And then you say, all right, you've got COVID. And then when he dies of cancer, you put down cancer and COVID. Died with COVID. You know, catching Tom, the man who marched up and down for the people, 100 years old, former soldier, back and forth he went, like the Duke of York, 100 times for the people. And we all got out of our houses on Thursday night and clapped for carers. Remember that? Those glorious moments of human solidarity that we all experienced during COVID. You hear people say, oh, I remember during lockdown, during COVID, during lockdown, during COVID. Remember during lockdown, they were doing this. Remember during lockdown, when I had a job. Remember during lockdown, when I had a life. Before I had a life. And there's this blank 2.5 years. Lobotomy. A lobotomy on humanity. You know, lobotomy was a very good thing one time. People used to be mad, used to put them in Bedlam, in the Imperial War Museum now. They called it Bedlam. You could go there and pay someone, and you go, 1850, you go to the madhouse. You wander around the madhouse, you pay someone, you look at all the loonies, you know, like coming in Speaker's Corner back in the day. And then you come out and say, look at those mad people. They decide, well, you can't have all these mad people running around. So they decided, they invented a new type of science. The science was, you get a piece of metal with a sharp edge on it, you know, a really sharp, like knife thing, and you stick it into someone's head about here, and you go up and down and sideways. You lobotomize them, and then they go like this all day long. They're like this. But they're not going to attack anyone. They don't kill anyone. They're not scary apart from, you see, unless that's scary. They're like zombies. That was the science of the day. Now, I'm not saying that recent modern science, of course, is far better, isn't it? Far better. After all, they told you, vitamin D doesn't come from the sun. In fact, you don't need vitamin D. You need to stay at home in a room on your own, waiting for the plague to pass. Now the plague is gone, thank God. Who took a PCR test last week? How many of you took a test last week? How do you know you're not spreading COVID? How do you know you're not amongst the COVID? Why don't you social distance now? Have you washed your hands in the last 20 minutes? Did you pick your nose? Put some COVID in your nose? You're disgusting. Oh, you didn't need to know that detail, my friend. We didn't need to know that detail. Why aren't you wearing a mask? There are a couple of people at Speaker's Corner now. There's one over there, he's got a mask.
Tell us about
There's a couple of people with it underneath their head. Underneath their head, sorry?
BRICS Summit next week.
I know about BRICS Summit, BRICS Summit.
Some
people think, I think mistakenly, that you can just unify a few countries against the Americans and that this will somehow reconstellate the world. I don't think that's how the world works. World is about power. The idea that power is not exercised at the barrel of a gun or at the power of commodities, of markets, of production, this is mistaken. Those people who think Brazil, India and China are going to get together and make some powerful alliance that will challenge the Americans, this is a mistake. The Soviets, you know, in the 1980s, they had an alliance across the whole of Eastern Europe. And they could even have made an alliance with the Chinese. And they had many people around the world who supported them. But then one day the whole thing collapsed like a pack of cards. Like a pack of cards. They had the non-aligned countries. Yugoslavia was the head. You used to have Tito run around the world. We're all non-aligned countries fighting for freedom against the American imperial power. But in reality, the rulers in many of these countries, they're prepared to take the dollar. And therefore you cannot trust Lula in Brazil. You cannot trust Modi in Africa. They are not allies of the people. They're enemies of the people. So the idea that you can make some alliance at the top to bypass the power, the alliance must come from below, from the people. From below, there isn't a way around that. There's no secret form. Look at how they operate. Lockdown across the whole world means rebellion from below across the whole world is the only solution to the power from above. How else can you do it? Yeah, they want digital currency. They want you all controlled by some currency. That's the idea. Actually, I think there's a little bit overplayed. The idea they can unify the whole world under currency. You know, only a couple of years ago, there were lots of people, Bitcoin, everything's going to be Bitcoin. Bitcoin is just a game, gambling game. Now, they would like to have digital currencies. They dream of digital currencies. They dream of the power they'd like for digital. And they all talk, well, in China, they got digital currency. Actually, digital currency in China is not so powerful. Not so powerful. Although, if you want to go and pay in China, you have to, they talk about social credit. Everyone goes, oh, China, it's going to be like China. They've got social credit there. If you don't do something, you get put in, you get put in the sin bin, and you can't travel by rail. You can't travel by plane. You can't travel. Actually, that's not how it happens in China. In theory, they got social credit. In practice, they don't. In lockdown in China, they imposed electronic control over the whole society. They had cameras everywhere. They had QR codes everywhere. Remember, here we had the same thing. You want to go to the pub? Remember, June 21. You want to go to the pub? You get a QR code. Have you scanned in? Then we'll show you to your seat. You can sit down now. They spray your hand. And now you can sit down. I went to Mexico, the spring of 2021. 2022, sorry.
I wish you'd stayed.
I went to Mexico. Shut up. I brought you that shirt back, didn't I?
Oh, you did.
I went to Mexico, and then there they had masks on all the time and spray all the time. I sat down with my eldest son for a meal, and then the woman sprayed his hand. When they ever come to spray my hand, I said, "Tengo alergia. I've got an allergy." And then she come with a menu in plastic, and she sprayed the menu. They give me the menu for the spray.
Never mind.
If I smell that spray, I feel like whacking people around the face. When I see someone the other day, little boy, 4 or 5 years of age, the father putting this shit on his hands, putting this gunge, this stinking gunge. And forever the children will remember the horror of that time, smelling that in the air, that gunge that they called sanitizer. Sanitizers coming to town. So this idea that we live in freedom, well, it's clearly contradicted by what happens. When it suits their interest, they abolish freedom. So we have to create freedom from below. That's what we tried to do when we fought against their lockdowns, their restrictions, their mandates for jabs. When we fought against their powers they wanted to impose. When they try and introduce digital currency, as they're trying now, it can be opposed, and it will be opposed. And even though they've tried to introduce a thing like that in China, very few people use the national digital currency. They use the same as people do here. They use their card on a mobile phone. That's what they use. So the idea they're going to have this all-powerful, all-knowing, all-controlling. They can't do that in China. You know what happened? They tried to create a digital system of administration of lockdown. It completely collapsed. In the spring of 2022, they had a big lockdown in China, in Shanghai. The digital control system collapsed. Everything was done on paper. Everything was done on paper. So the idea you can install some tyrannical digital rule over the population, it's not true. Despite what some people would like it to be true. It's not true. That's not how things actually work. They want artificial intelligence, control the world, They watch you, tell you what to do. You talk to a machine, the machine answers, the machine chases you, the machine watches you, the machine observes you, the machine exploits you. That's the dream they want. But when they make this chat GTP and stuff like that, it doesn't work. You ask it a question, it can't give you a proper answer. So the idea that they can make these tyrannical systems of ubiquitous and universal power, I think is false.